Good evening. Welcome to the Lawrence Alliance for Education meeting for March 13th. We will now call the meeting to order. We will start with a Pledge of Allegiance. Good evening. Before we jump in, you may notice I am not John Connolly. I did think of wearing my sneakers today with my suit, just because that seems a very John Connolly thing, but John and I think members of his family are ill with a stomach bug, and we said, please stay away. So they are recuperating, but in his absence, we will continue with what I think is a very exciting agenda, a lot of really interesting and good things to discuss. So we'll start with public comment. We have one person signed up for public comment, Mr. Mali.
Mayan Mali, 53 Chester Street. Good evening, honorable members. The great genius Horace Mann, who reformed our public school, said, education, the most important social equalizer that balances the wheel of machinery of the society. In our city, with outstanding progress of our public school, the city of immigrants has become the example of the progress. Education enables our children to overcome all the barriers, economic barrier, cultural barrier, language barrier. We are grateful to honorable, impeccable leadership of Honorable Cynthia Paris for her leadership. Now our public school has more level 1 school, more high school graduate, more parental involvement. Honorable Superintendent Paris planned 100 days just listening to the school staff and our community and giving principals autonomy in each school has been essential problem solver. Thank you for revising Lawrence Public School academic calendar. Thank you for keeping our schools open during the crisis of September 13. Let's move forward in the era of that citizen uprising from California to West Virginia in support of the teachers union. We are proud that in this city, the birthplace of the revolution of the bread and roses, we are united to support our teachers and their union. Great Harvard University scholar Henry Adams said, the teacher effect indeed lasts to eternity. No one can tell when the teacher influences on our society stops. As we see the impact of the great teacher, we need to support our teachers and union. In this year of the election, we need to support our superintendent. Remember, thank our hard-working custodial employees. We need to support them. Also, we are grateful to improvement of the facility and facility management. Lawrence Public School as a district is improving and moving forward. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, before we jump into the rest of the agenda, I want to make a recommended change just to one of the items. We have the budget meeting update as the 6th item on the agenda, and I'm going to propose that we move it after the school calendar proposal. Part of this, in talking to the superintendent, is just with the flow of topics. It just makes more sense, given the order, to put it there, because we're going to be first talking about the budget guidelines, then we'll talk about the school calendar proposal, and then an update on the work to date. So that's okay with the board. I don't know if we have to do a formal motion or approval for that, but just wanted to note that for the board. All right, we will continue with the superintendent's report.
Thanks, Ventura. So we have many points of pride in our district, and tonight I wanted to highlight a handful. We are very, very excited and proud of our Enlace community, who is a finalist for the Samsung Solve for Tomorrow competition. So we are top 10, and our students are going to New York City next month and pitch their projects, to judges in New York City. So shout out to Enlace and all of our students. We also wanted to note that we are going to be having an information session tomorrow night here in the library for LPAC. So that's the English Learner Parent Advisory Council, and we're going to be having an information session. This group will act similar to that of the CPAC. It is part of the Look Act, which provides districts with more flexibilities for language acquisition programs. And so we're going to start sharing the information and recruiting families. Next, I wanted to share that last night, we had our first cohort of fellowship graduations. This is a cohort of schools, 6 schools, that include teachers, include leadership, and it's an efforts and our commitment to strengthening our family and engagement efforts. These schools spend 32 hours learning how to really deeply connect with our families. They drafted visions, they had lessons learned, and we're gonna be onboarding our next cohort later this spring. And lastly, I wanted to thank our judges, Julia, Pat, and Dan, for participating in Dancing with the Stars last week. It was a fun event, and we really appreciate your participation.
That was fun.
Thank you. Any questions, comments from the board? All right. Report of the chair, the only thing I just want to remind the board members, and we've already seen responses, is the NEASC email that was sent today. I've already seen a couple of responses, but if board members are able to make that Sunday time, that would be much appreciated for the NEASC process. Okay, we're going to have a facilities update. Would you like to set it up?
Yep, of course. So I'm going to ask Chris Merlino, our Director of Operations, and Anne-Marie Stronach to join us while this is getting queued up. And they're going to have a brief update on our facilities. They will show us and connect us back to the appropriation that was given to us earlier this winter and the significant amount of projects that are underway and also those that have been conducted.
Good evening, board members. My name is Chris Merlino, Director of Facilities. Thank you for this opportunity to show you the great work that is going on in our schools throughout our district. We're able to accomplish what you're about to see because of the hard work of our custodial staff and DPW, as well as the continued support of Mayor Rivera and Superintendent Paris. In this video presentation, I want to draw your attention to the Mass School Building Authority accelerated repair projects, such as the roof and boiler projects at the Arlington School, which was completed in August of 2018, as well as the boiler project at the North Common Educational Complex, which has also been completed. This summer, the roof at the North Common will be replaced. The 4 projects alone total almost $9.5 million. With the support of the state, Mayor Dan Rivera, the City Council, and Anne-Marie Stronach's diligence to the paperwork, the cost of the city was $1.9 million, 80% reimbursement. Dave, could you please show the video? Flooring, projects completed. Green cafeteria, Patham Teachers Room, Bruce Library, Arlington Gym, Gilmet Gym, Frost Gym, Hennessy Gym. Upcoming flooring projects: South Lawrence East Office, Lawrence High School, Main Office, Library, Lecture Hall, Food Service Offices, North Common Education Complex, First Floor Hall and Double Stairway, Patham, Library and Auditorium, Tile Box, Cafeteria, Gym Floor Refinishing, Patham, South Lawrence East, Weatherby. These are upcoming projects. Bathroom petitions, upcoming projects, Hennessy, Bruce. Petitions completed, Green School. Exterior LED lighting upgrades, projects completed, North Common Education Complex, Leahy School, Leonard School. Upcoming projects for LED lighting, Lawler, Rollins, Breen, Hennessy, Bruce, SES Annex. Boiler project completed, North Common Education Complex, Arlington School, Leahy School, Bruce School, Lawler School. Dock area, Arlington Dock area, Bruce School, Frost School, Lawler School. Roof projects completed, Arlington School. Upcoming roof projects are North Common Education Complex and Hennessy School Gym. Painting projects completed. South Lawrence East, all hallways. Gilmet halls. Allenton School hallways and boiler room. Potham School, all hallways, cafeteria, and library. North Common Education Complex, all staircases. Upcoming projects for painting. Potham classrooms and South Lawrence East classrooms. Hennessy School stairway and gymnasium, and Leonard School gymnasium and stage. Security screen upcoming projects. Bruce School, Leonard School. Projects completed, Gilmet School. Concrete repairs, upcoming projects. Lawrence High School, Weatherby, Potham. Concrete repairs completed, Potham School, South Lawrence East School. Elevator rebuilding is upcoming at the North Common Education Complex. Auditorium seating, upcoming project, North Common Education Complex. Classroom heater repairs, upcoming projects, Potham, Gilmet, Weatherby. Window balance repairs, upcoming projects, Hennessy, Bruce School. Chiller replacement project, Allenton School. Shade replacement, upcoming schools, South Lawrence East, Hennessy. Schools completed, Rollins, Bruce. Door camera and buzzers, complete, Hennessy. North Common Education Complex, South Lawrence East, Bruce Annex. Adult Learning Center, Frost. Intercom upgrades, upcoming, Hennessy, North Common Education Complex. Auditorium lighting, completed, South Lawrence East, Gilmet, Potham. Upcoming, Lawrence High School.
Great, thank you. Questions from the board?
Just have a question. Nice music choice too, Chris. So what is the process, like, do you guys do a complete capital needs assessment every year, every 5 years? Like, how do you guys rank, like, evaluate and rank the projects that are going to be done?
So we work with the DPW yearly, and the mayor is very involved in capital projects. This year, the funding come for some of those capital projects was the boilers at the Bruce and the Lawler and the Leahy. This year, we're doing paving. Next year, we have many issues with heating. When I say heating, we just had a meeting last week with the department heads and the mayor on the tar box in the Lawler and the Oliver. The pipes are very old, and we have to really put some money into our steam pipes. So we do build our CIP every year.
Okay.
As projects get completed, we add more.
Okay, great. And then I know that this is probably something that's sort of, there's so much to manage right now that it's hard to think in these terms, but is there any, like, is the school ever looking for opportunities or grant opportunities that would help us, like, increase energy efficiency or use alternative sources, like installing solar panels, if it's possible, or doing other things like that? Or is that just, we can't even think about that because there's so much other stuff we have to do?
No, we do think of that. We sit down with Teresa Park from the mayor's team. We actually just got a $30,000 rebate for the boilers at this school. We have talked about solar panels in the past. We're switching over many of our lights to LED, which is a huge saving.
Great. Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that in the past, there used to be this adversarial relationship between the building department at the city side and the custodial staff and the building department side on the school side. And we've tried to work really hard for them to work together. Chris is in meetings that he used to not be a part of, and Anne Marie is part of the conversation as we talk about spending money to fix what things. The effort that was put together a couple years back to fix air conditionings, and I know more about glycol than I ever want to know in my whole life. And so those types of things, I think, have made this facility this. The number of calls that we've gotten in the office from parents has gone down. about the quality of stuff in the schools. And when we do get something, it seems like the staff is Johnny on the spot and they fix it right away. We had a request to put latches on the doors at the Frost bathrooms, and you know, within a short period of time, it got fixed, and it's going to be improved on even after fixing it. Do you guys have a work order system?
We currently do, yes.
What does that look like? Is it
It's a form that every head custodian has in their building. They fill it out. They then fax it to us. We take it and scan it to the Department of Public Works, to Glengarry, the facilities department down there.
and they're using our system to track it too as well?
That's correct.
And then the work that was done with the fires, the different fires we've had, that stuff is all that's not added onto this, you know, watching
No,
those
Mayor,
projects.
I could have added many more projects, but I was told to keep it minimal because of timeframes. And after looking at all the projects, I just picked some of the big ones. The fire was at the Rollins. Like I said, that school was under budget, on time. There's many good projects going on in the city.
The Bruce, the same
in the
thing.
school department.
And so the reason why I bring those things up is that because I think now that we're in an annual CIP project process, and we're talking about what do we do, submit MSBA projects every year, there shouldn't be this discussion, we can't afford to do these X, Y, and Z projects. There should be, how come it's not on the list? We should have saw that coming. I'm very, I think the staff has been responsive to that. And we're doing the upgrades to the efficiencies and the modernization as catch can. As we go to fix these things, those things get changed. But I just want to say thank you for all the hard work.
Thank you.
Chris, I'd like to echo what the mayor said. I want to thank you for being aggressive with your team and looking at these very tired buildings and addressing some of the issues that have been going on for such a long time. And on that note, too, Mayor, I'd like to thank you and your staff for collaborating with the school department. That's been a plus, making sure our buildings are coming up to speed. So thank you to both sides.
Thank you.
So we also wanted to give you an update on MSBA projects and developments, so Anne Marie Stronach, our COO, will give you an update on that.
Madam Superintendent, what's MSBA?
I'm sorry?
What's MSBA stand for?
Anne Marie is
Mass School
good.
Building Authority.
What is it?
Mass School Building Authority.
Okay.
Massachusetts School Building Authority. We love them.
I know.
So I'm not going to go over the accelerated repair projects because Chris just gave you an overview of those, and you see those in the plan. And those two are on the CIP with the city council. So I want to make sure that people understand that when we're working with the city side on the CIP, we're looking at a holistic approach and a 5-year outlook. So it's a 5-year capital plan, and obviously that fluctuates as it comes forward. What I really want to draw your attention to is our 2 core projects. And the 2 core projects are the Oliver and the Leahy. I know I've been before you and presented them. I am happy to announce, actually thrilled to announce, that we just got a designer on board. We're in the process of negotiating their fee, and that is Sims, Maney, and McKee. SMMA is what we're going to be calling them, SMMA with the MSBA. We're very excited to have them on board. They also did a lot of work in our district, so they're very familiar. They are the people that did some assessment for us, and they also did some visioning work at the high school. So they are well-versed in our community, and that's going to be a big plus for us. They are also have been in business for over 65 years, so we're thrilled to have such an experienced company working with us on this project. So as the mayor likes to say, that sometimes with MSBA, it's hurry up and wait. Well, now we're in a rush to get a few more things done, and the work is really going to start amping up on that project. We expect that the phase that we're in, which is called schematic design, will last about 12 to 18 months, depending on where we go. What will happen in this process is the funding from the city has already been provided to $4 million so that we can basically design the building. And then we will go to the next phase, have to go back to the MSBA before we can actually put the design in play and get all the HVAC, like the guts of it. So we'll have a end product to show you soon, but then we go to the next step. With regards to the Leahy School, we are in the project management phase. We just, in that same board meeting in February, we were approved to move to the feasibility phase, the phase that we just got out of with the Oliver. So we will be having a project manager come on board, and the RFS just went to the MSBA this week. So we're very excited about that, and we look forward to keeping you all informed on those two projects.
Just real quick on, so the Oliver School went through the phase where you talk about what you need, and then you agree with MSBA that that's what you need, and
Yep.
that we're okay with that piece. And now in the second stage where we pick an architect, you call him the designer, but just for layman's terms, like we pick an architect to design the
Yep.
building for us, and we're in that stage. Is there gonna be opportunity for people to get input to that process?
This is the stage where we'll be going out and requesting a lot of public input, have meetings with the stakeholders. And when I say stakeholders, I mean community partners that work with both the Up Oliver and the OPS school, because we are, and we have to present 3 designs to the MSBA. One that would be just to upgrade the facility as it stands right now with HVAC and electric. That would net $0, but they do require you to cost analysis on that.
So, but you're also talking about getting input from parents and
Everybody.
teachers?
Teachers, but that's what I was gonna say about the partners. So, you know, when we're talking about partners, we're talking about teachers, we're talking about community members, we're talking about parents, we're talking about neighbors, we're talking about students, we're talking about the people that use the ball field behind us. We're going to be trying to tap into everyone that has anything to do with that building, and this building as well, and what the services are that we provide currently, and more important, what we need for the future and the long-term future. We want to build a school that's going to sustain us for the next 30 to 40 years at least.
And out of that process will be a document that says how much it will cost to actually build it, and then we have to go before the city council again to
Exactly.
get that borrowing approved.
And actually, we have to go in front of the MSBA to do a project funding agreement, which is what you're talking about, where we will get into a room with the MSBA and basically have a lot of good, healthy discussion about what we believe we need in terms of what we think that we need, and that will be over and above what is allotted by the MSBA, and what we need in terms of how we produce our education here in Lawrence and the things we need. So we may ask for more special education services, for example, that aren't necessarily something that is in their formula, but we could have some healthy discussion and use some influence and convince them to support that additional space. So those kind of conversations. And that's why it's important to get the input, because we need to show the evidence to the MSBA when we go to them with that project funding agreement. Once that is completed, then we go to the city council and ask for the dollars. They have to decide what the dollars is. Once that dollar amount is proposed, that dollar amount cannot move. It can move down, but it can't move up.
And so the Leahy is in a different place. The Leahy is that still place where we're trying to agree on what the education needs are for that, and who are we gonna hire to help us come through that, to that.
That
the
is
project
correct.
manager. Okay.
That is correct.
So the process of gathering input from the different stakeholders around design and use and so on, how is that going to be publicized and managed?
So we have 2 partners in this. One is our owner's project manager, which is Pink and Company, and the other is Sims, Maney, and McKee. And they have people that work on this and specialize in this, and they will help drive that outreach. I can tell you that in processes, you'll probably have, by the time we're ended up with this process, I would say 20 to 30 meetings that we can basically talk to in stakeholders groups. It would be similar to what we experienced when we looked for a superintendent search, where we were trying to get as much input as we could. So we'll be reaching out in multitudes of ways, and there'll be multiple communication in trying to get those stakeholders to the table.
I'll just add, Jess, that during interviews, when we had time with the firms, we were very curious about their process for engaging community, including the fact that we required them to be bilingual and bicultural and sensitive to our community. So they had really good ideas, and we feel really confident in the architect and our firms to be able to manage that process for us.
They actually have, I believe, a member that is from Lawrence on this team. So we're really excited about that, too.
Questions? Thank you.
Thank you both.
Really appreciate
You're
it.
welcome. Have a good night.
Oh, you know, I just want to, in the paper that you handed out, it does have timelines on the bottom. So the expectation is the Oliver completion date year is still the summer before school starts in 2023, and that the Leahy School is going to be a year after that.
That's what, in best case scenario,
Best
that's
case
what we're
scenario.
looking at.
That's right.
Great. Thank you. Okay, so based on the minor revision to the agenda, we're now going to be talking about the budget guidelines. And that is in the documents that were put in front of you. We're going to be talking about two. The first one is budget overview and budget guidelines fiscal year 20. And then the second one we'll talk about is the budget timeline. So with the budget overview and guideline, this is a revision of a document we discussed at our last meeting. And so John took the feedback and put it in this new revised version. And I think the goal here is really to lay out at a high level for the district that we as receivers are saying that the overall budget process will be structured around these three pillars of student achievement, student services, and educational infrastructure, and that there are four guidelines, really are core principles that are guiding the development of the budget this year. I'll let the board members maybe spend a few minutes reading it, and then we would be seeking a vote on this, just that we as the LAE have, are accepting and voting on these to guide the budget process for the district.
I'd like to make a motion to approve as presented for discussion.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Oh, no, that's so we can have a discussion.
Just to have the discussion.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
Discussion.
Got it.
I thought, and maybe I just misremembering it, that part of the motion, I think that we did last time was that there was gonna be something in the transparent section that talked about document looking like the city's document. Am I missing that? Or did we do that in a different place? I could be wrong, I may be misremembering it.
What was the question again? Or the comment? I
Yeah,
didn't hear what.
in the last bullet, the budget will be transparent by providing and presenting thorough, detailed, and clear information on the allocation of resources for the coming school year. I thought that in our discussion last time was to have that also say in a manner as produced by the city's budget process.
I agree. No, I agree. I think that was discussed at the last meeting.
So my understanding from the last meeting is that we discussed that we felt that would be the best way to do it, and there was even a share of how the template will look like, but it was not going to be written in the document.
I believe it was something to the effect that it should mirror the city's budget.
Template.
Yes, yeah, I remember that. Yeah, we were talking about even saying that, comparing apples with apples. But I think John said something along the lines that that piece did not pertain to the overview of the budget guidelines. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, and I think my understanding is that this is something that, when we think of the budget book specifically, right, that it would mirror what what's presented at the subcommittee would mirror what is created for the town side, correct?
I'm just checking my paperwork,
Yep.
sorry.
Sure. As the mayor's checking, are there other questions or thoughts around this first document? Jess?
I don't remember whether we said that it would be reflected in the budget guideline document, but I do agree with the mayor and Julia that it should be, just so that, I think that this has been a kind of back and forth point for a while, and it may seem like this budget overview and guideline is a sort of more 30,000-foot document, and that might be a little bit of getting into the weeds. But given the fact that I think we're taking fairly seriously our responsibility around fiscal oversight, we'd like to be able to understand the information presented in the best light possible. And I think it was a clear view of the majority of the board that we'd like to see it in that format. So if it's going to take putting that in the budget overview document in order to sort of spur implementation of that, then I'm all for it.
Yeah, so what I have, thank you, Mr. Chair. What I have is that we would add mirroring the city budget document to line and department level, including capital spending. And
Sorry,
so-
can you repeat that language? Mirroring city budget.
So that's transparent, when it comes to transparent, the LPS budget will be transparent by providing, presenting thorough, detailed, and clear information on the allocated resources for the coming school year, mirroring the city budget document to line and department level, including capital spending.
Well, and it looks like from the minutes last time, It looks like from the minutes last time that that the mayor made a motion that I seconded about having the school budget document mirror the city budget document. Then there was discussion, and we did not, it doesn't seem like we actually voted on that motion, but instead made a motion to table the discussion until this meeting.
That's correct, but, yeah, and, one of the things that I want to say, and I do agree with everybody about that, because we want to make sure that we compare what happened, at the different levels. But I thought that there was a reason why it was not going to be on this document, but in another document, but I just don't remember. I don't remember what was the
As
reason.
noted on the minutes, this, I think, it was left that this would be, the budget template is our responsibility in a sense. However, and this is what John said at the last minute, to allow further discussion on this. So basically, we didn't necessarily agree 100% on it, but I think we were all in agreement that in order to have more transparency and to be able to track a lot of the changes during the year, that this is the reason why the request was being made by the mayor, and I actually second it because I think it provides for us a document that we can always go back to, and especially when they're coming before us later on asking for appropriation of
Sure.
funding in different areas. So whether it should be noted in writing, maybe this is what we should discuss, whether we want it actually in writing, or whether we can just approve it by saying, yes, it is going to mirror the city's budget template. I don't know. So, whether it should be in writing, that we want to see that so that there won't be any changes later on.
I think just to note, the minutes said that Chair Connolly noted that the budget's template is a responsibility of the budget subcommittee to allow further discussion. And the second document we'll talk about is the 3 meetings of that budget subcommittee. So I think that's where it was saying it'll be discussed there. But I think I'm also hearing, just loud agreement from, and I don't want to speak for everyone, but I've heard at least 3-4 board members speak to the strong desire to have, again, the school's budget mirror the city budget documents to align to department spending.
Yes.
But again, at least noted as last meeting, would be something that would be taken up by the budget subcommittee meeting, which is currently scheduled for March 21st. It's just, how I think, as I understood where we left it last time. Mayor?
So why I think it's important to have it in this document, because this is the aspirational document. This is the document that talks about where we're gonna spend our money, how we're gonna do that. It's very, like was said earlier, high level. This is a huge shift with the way that the budget is prepared by the schools today. And I think it's a big enough shift that we should put it in this document so everybody's clear that what we're gonna produce at the end is not a facsimile thereof, or something near like, or a budget book light compared to the city, but something that mirrors the city budget line department. And that is, it's not an insignificant thing to say it that way. It's a big thing. I will say again, we've been talking about this such a long time. It shouldn't be something that people are rushing to do at last minute, because we've been talking about it since LAE was created, and even to some extent further than that. So I think it's important for people to know that it's in this document. Just as we know we're gonna focus every dollar as we can, it's gonna be student-focused, it's gonna be equitable, it's gonna support the student success, and in its effort to be transparent, it's gonna be a document that looks like the current city budget document. And without saying that specific language, I don't want, there might be some confusion and some leeway to give us something less than what we
So
have.
should it be on the fourth guideline?
Yeah.
Like, like an additional sentence on the same guidelines as transparent?
And I think we have the language. Mayor, if you want to
Yeah,
start
so
one
if
more
we
time.
want, if somebody wants to introduce a friendly amendment to my motion for
Mm-hmm.
the, to mirror, that instead of a period, the grammar folks can help me out, comma, maybe semicolon, I don't know.
Period.
Mirror for the coming school year, mirror the city budget document to line and department, including capital spending.
Can you amend your
You
own
can
motion?
amend your,
And so, I can amend the motion, but, can I do that?
I think so.
So I'd like to amend my motion to approve as presented with the adding of the line, mirror the city budget document to line and department, including capital spending.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, so now we're voting on
adding
accepting.
it.
Unless there's other discussion.
Yep.
Right? And we can vote.
So this is the friendly amendment to the initial amendment that the
Right.
mayor made.
So once we vote, it'll be good.
Yep, so I'm just looking around, or anyone else like to add, or any
I just want
questions,
to
comments?
say, one thing. So I agree with everything, and I agree that we have to add the phrase. What I would like to see is that after we approve it, that's, it being refined here, and then we see the full document again with the amendment.
Oh,
Yeah, absolutely. I can provide people with the
Okay.
budget document.
I just want to ask one question of the superintendent. So Cynthia, given that this is a big change, but it's one that the board feels strongly about, are there additional resources that you guys need in order to make that happen?
No, our team will work on providing, the budget book as requested.
Okay, thanks.
Further questions, comments?
Just a point of information. As noted in the minutes by Mr. Chairman John, just keeping in mind that the budget subcommittee can also make changes as we see fit, as we're working on the review of the budget. So just to make sure that that is understood.
Agreed.
Do you say changes to the budget guidelines?
If we came across something that we feel that would significantly merit changing or adding,
Okay.
something that the budget subcommittee can work on those changes, of course, it will need to be presented to the board for full approval, but that we should be able to do that as we're working on the budget.
Sure.
Okay, so we'll close the discussion again. To be clear, we are now voting on accepting this document with the amendment that was added to it. So we have a motion, we have a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Abstention? Motion passes. Thank you. Okay, and the second item related to budget timeline, it relates to budget timeline. So we have here a schedule for 3 budget subcommittee hearings that are happening later in March and in April. We have the regular LAE meeting, which is scheduled for April 10th. And then there's a proposal of a second meeting in April where, again, given the budget timeline, we'd be able to entertain and consider specific budget motions. We actually now understand that April 24th is a conflict with the school committee meeting. That's my understanding. And so we'd be actually looking at, can we do it the 25th? And so I'm going to ask if board members have a way to check their calendars, and we could try to lock that in tonight.
I can't. We have at the Lawrence Public Library, Julia Alvarez is coming. So, and that's a big event for the city.
I can do it.
Is there anyone else for whom the date does not work?
I have no idea, honestly.
I'm good on that.
I'm
I'm
good
good on
too.
the 25th.
Yep. Okay. I think for now, it works for most board members. Once, after the, so I think for now, let's say that we're planning on the 25th, because it looks like we'll have the majority of the board members there. Okay? Thank you. All right, the next item relates to school calendar proposal. So for this one, we will be referring to a few documents. The first is overview of school improvement plan process for Lawrence Alliance for Education. It's the one with the nice visuals. We'll then be talking about 2 additional documents. One of them is the calendar, and then the second one just has a motion related to school operational plans. So what I'll do is I'll just sort of talk through the first document that I hope provides some context for the two motions that we're going to vote on tonight. So the document in front of you lays out, as part of our turnaround plan for Lawrence, we have a process in place that's spelled out that talks about the creation of the district budget, or rather calendar, and then it also talks about the, in our open architecture model, we have school improvement plans or school operational plans that are created at the school level, and then there's a process that it sort of plays out to get those approved. So step 1 is the superintendent proposes a baseline calendar to the LAE, which the superintendent presented last week, and we had some discussion on, and we'll have a chance to do step 2, which is the LAE votes to approve the superintendent's baseline calendar. So that will be the first motion that we're going to be looking at closely and entertaining. What happens after that typically is that school-based teams then create their school improvement plans. So based on the calendar that's published, schools meet, they create their plans, they outline what their strategies are going to be, and then they present those plans for the superintendent's approval, which is step 4. Now, there are 2 things that can happen after that. One is step 5, the superintendent reviews and approves the school improvement plan as submitted. So, that's just a process that we're sort of, as a board, needing to decide. The way that the turnaround plan is written, it's the receiver that reviews and approves the plan. And so motion number 2 is saying that we're actually delegating that authority to the superintendent to be able to not only review the plans, but then have the authority on behalf of the LAE to approve them. So that's what the second motion we'll talk about. The second motion also says that if the superintendent rejects a school improvement plan as submitted, so a school puts forward something, we would expect that there's a process where the superintendent's engaging with the school and going back and forth and, reaching some understanding. In cases, however, where that is not the case, then that school improvement plan would be presented to the LAE, to this board, for review and approval. And then we would have to talk about what that process would look like, and, you know, who would present that, and things like that. Again, I think the goal, the understanding is that the superintendent and her team would work with the school to get at a plan that, you know, makes sense for the students in that school and align to the baseline calendar. So we're not expecting that this is a process we'd be using a lot, but at least wanted to create something where there would be recourse, and then the board, you know, is ultimately, all school improvement plans are made public by April 15th. So the document you have in front of you, that's the school calendar information, this is very similar to what we reviewed last meeting. It is the first motion, and we've been working, the superintendent, and that's why we decided to have the motion written, just so we're all clear on what we're voting on. So the first motion is move that upon the recommendation of the superintendent, the Lawrence Alliance for Education approve the baseline school calendar for the Lawrence Public Schools for school year 1920 as follows. And if you all want to take a look at that, it is, I believe, exactly what we discussed at our last meeting.
So I just have a question about that. Is this, we have 2 first days of school listed, the 26th and the 28th, and is this to kind of take care of some of the concern that John had raised around professional development days, or what's the, I'm not,
What
Yeah.
gives?
okay,
The 26th is the first day for staff members, and the
staff.
28th is for students.
okay.
Mr. Chair? Along those lines, you said that it was the same as is this the exact same calendar? Because I don't see any language in the motion that basically says, through open architecture, you know, buildings that have more autonomy will do X, Y, and Z, and that was a point of contention last time. So I'm just wondering if that all has been hammered out and we don't need to talk about it.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. And what this does is that, so per the turnaround plan, what we've reviewed is the process that's spelled out there, where this is the baseline calendar, and then school operational teams or teacher leadership teams at the schools have the ability to put forward a plan. Sometimes it will be different from what's being proposed as the calendar, but that's why the step is in place where the superintendent reviews and approves them. And for ones that, for whatever reason, you know, the superintendent maybe is not approving, and there's further conversation, those will be brought before the LAE for consideration and vote.
Okay. I'd like to move the motion as presented.
Is there a second?
Just a question.
For discussion?
Yeah, I'll second it for discussion, further
Okay.
discussion. Were the issues that were addressed last week by John addressed in this, in terms of the, and I'm sorry if I missed, if anybody talked about it, but addressed in this revision? In terms of the, that's what he just said, I'm
Well,
sorry.
but I
because
think
was
it's
looking
important
at this.
because it's actually important to highlight again, where I think some of the discussion last meeting was that, you know, the district, so what this process does, and it's what's in the turnaround plan, is this is a step that the superintendent approves a baseline calendar. Like, that's what happens, and then the school-based teams have the ability to put forward their plan. It can exceed or be different from what's in the baseline calendar, but there's a process by which, in motion 2, we'll get to this, we would say the superintendent, we're delegating our receiver's authority to the superintendent to be able to review and approve the submitted plans. And in case there happens to be a plan that, you know, the superintendent rejects and we want to further consider, that would come to the LAE board for discussion and ultimate approval.
Okay, thank you. That clarifies my concerns. No, it's fine.
So we're still going to see the plans? I understood you up until the very last sentence,
Yep.
which was, if we're delegating the authority to the superintendent, then, but are we still going to see the plan? So how are we going to know? I mean, is it gonna be, it's gonna be the superintendent's obligation to let us know when she does not approve something, and then it automatically comes to us for discussion?
Correct,
Okay.
correct.
Thank you.
Other questions? Okay, so the first motion is to approve again, the motion, I read it earlier, but to approve this baseline calendar that's being submitted by the superintendent.
Yeah, I moved that motion.
And Julio seconded it.
Okay, so all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Okay, so that motion passes. And the second motion. Yes, sorry, I just get through things, I know. Thank you. And the second motion is listed on a separate piece of paper. It's just the motion itself, and it says, "Move that any school operational plan approved by the superintendent shall be deemed to be approved by the Lawrence Alliance for Education in its role as receiver for the Lawrence Public Schools. Any school operational plan not approved by the superintendent shall be submitted to the Lawrence Alliance for Education for review." And so again, this is getting to the second step of the process. But to be clear, we as a receivership board are delegating approval of plans to the superintendent, with the exception of cases where the superintendent is not approving a plan, and then it would come to us for review, but only for those plans that the superintendent is not approving.
So just a question about the process around that, because I can foresee this being sticky. So what's going to happen then? Is that the school is then going to come and argue for why their plan should be approved, and the superintendent's going to present her counter-argument for why it needs to not be approved or needs to be amended or still worked on?
Yeah, I mean, I think, first and foremost, I think that the goal here, the hope, is that the superintendent is working with the schools to come with, to agree, and so we're not, this is just maybe my own bias, but we shouldn't be hearing a whole lot of, cases like this.
Right.
But I think then, if we do, I think that's actually a process that we probably need to further define. I think the way you've outlined it is a way that it could happen, where people are presenting, but we'd have to, just confirm that.
Right. Yeah, I think we should think about what would be the most productive process to have around that.
Mayor?
I don't know who wrote this motion, but I need to have them in my office. Because this looks like we're giving the superintendent all the power, but we're really not. Because if she likes it, then it's okay, but if she doesn't like it, then we want to be over her shoulder about it. So I wonder if the term is really approved by the superintendent, and whether or not the word shall or may can be transplanted instead of shall for may. Shall is very specific. That means everything denied will come before us. May means that there can be an agreement about those that can come before us and those that don't. I'm not really sure that, and I think I've always said this, I'm not an education policy person, what happens in the classroom and the pedagogy, all this stuff that you guys do to teach kids. I'm going to lean on subject matter experts. We pay the superintendent a lot of money to do this work, and so we're leaning on her to have the best interest of what's happening in the classroom. I think other board members may have more interest in that than I do. But, in a situation where we have EMOs and partners that don't belong to the regular part of the system, who may have different ideas about how to do this, literally we could have 8 of these a year or 10 of these a year. Maybe I'm overstating it, maybe 7 of them a year. And so I worry about that we're going to get into this place where we're having a public debate about the calendar for the Leonard, and then a public debate about the calendar for the Arlington, I forget the Arlington part that has a charter partner. And then Spark has a different conversation, and then we're like going through this thing. And that concerns me because public debate is not always civil, and then these people have to go back and work together. So I don't know if there's room to make this friendly amendment from shall to may, and then we can say may, that we're only going to hear 2 or 3 of them a year, or 1 of them a year, 2 or 3 of them a year to cap it, so that there's a sense that not everybody can go around the superintendent on the matter of the calendar.
I do have a comment on that, and I think the shall might be there, but not necessarily to go through a full review process, which we'll have to define what is a review, but it'll be more about keeping us up to date with what's going on, and that, like, because let's say that a school is in disagreement, and we know from third parties because the superintendent didn't inform us. So I'm trying to figure out like the lines of communications, but at the same time, I agree with you. There has to be a process by which we discern which ones will merit to come to full discussion and which ones through a process that we decide it would be to the discretion of the superintendent. So this is something that probably will need a little bit of having a further discussion to see how does that process will look like, so then we will not end up having 8, 10 of this discussion publicly, that don't merit to have that.
Yeah, it's knowing the city that we live in, this is something that could create some situations. But rather than concentrated on the may or the shall, I think perhaps one of the things that we should say is, or that should be included here, under extreme conditions that the superintendent and the other parties are not able to come to a compromise, then this would be an option or a place for them to come with their grievance, if you may. Mm-hmm. But this is under extreme circumstances when they are not, because we're giving the superintendent all the powers to deal with this, and I don't think we want to be seeing people coming really before us just to say, oh, I wanted the 25th, and she said, I can only have the 24th. So maybe it's just a matter of adding under extreme circumstances or that where a compromise cannot be reached.
And I agree with you, but even with that, it's going with the fact of defining what is extreme, because they will consider that it's extreme. So I think that as part of the process is defining us what those critical.
Well, extreme in a situation like that is something that is going to alter everything that they're doing if they don't get what they want at that point. But based on, I'm sure that the superintendent has given this enough consideration with the rest of the staff to make sure that this is something that can work for everybody. And there will always be people that are going to be upset because that's not what I wanted and it's not what I had in mind. But there has to be some type of a process in place that people need to follow and that they need to understand these are the guidelines and this is what you're going to go by.
Yes, and that's what I'm saying. Like, I agree with you. It's just that piece that you just said, it should be also in writing, so then we'll not have everybody thinking that it's critical or.
Yeah, I guess I feel that there is some way in which, and in a worst case scenario, this setup is kind of a recipe for a power struggle between the superintendent and, an EMO or EMOs in general, or any other school and one would hope that, I feel like what we should be doing again, instead of thinking about it this way, is thinking about how to incentivize the parties to work it out. And I'm also just thinking in terms of the role of a board, like if my board told me that all the LCW departments had to create, operational work plans, which they all do, and Juan and I, my deputy director and I had to approve them, but if we didn't approve them, that department could go in front of my board and argue about whether the plan was valid or not. That is crazy. That undermines, not that I am normally, sort of on the side of authority necessarily, but I feel like it does undermine authority and operational authority that the superintendent has. And I would rather that we as a board were focusing our efforts on, number one, how are we creating a structure in which the superintendent and the individual schools are incentivized to work together on this. Number two, if there are like significant concerns around the amount of professional development that resonate across the school district, there should be a way for that topic as a substantive topic of discussion to come to the board so that we can figure out how to more adequately resource professional development across the entire district and not just respond to individual schools that want to add one day or, or more here and there. So I guess I'm a little worried about it in this way. I don't know.
I think that I'm prepared to vote on this document, on this motion, with some language as provided by Member Silverio, under extreme circumstances, if no agreement can be reached between the superintendent and the school and the building staff or the building leadership, but that that either no building can come before the board over a 5 or 3 year period of time more than once. You see what I'm saying? Like, you don't even have to have that. And I think if people are so stuck on just having this, that we have a mechanism to say we don't have to hear it every time. We can just take a vote to support the superintendent without hearing anything. Because everybody has the right to go to the Supreme Court, but the Supreme Court doesn't hear everything. And my concern is that if the word shall is in there, then we have to review it. And I don't want to review them all.
Yes, and that's the reason why it's important to have the language that define what we should be saying and how often. So I agree with you, but it should be in writing. Because the other thing that could happen is that people bypassing the superintendent, and we don't want that either. Because then, like Jess was saying, undermine her.
And there is a level of faith
to do
that
her
we're jumping
job.
into this. Sorry about that. There's going to be some type of review process that's not yet defined, so that there's still an expectation that the term extreme circumstance is yet to be defined.
Yes.
So I'll take the jump on the review if everybody's willing to take the jump on the extreme circumstance.
Others want to weigh in? I guess I'd love to offer some thoughts, just having, so.
And if I may, once you're done, Ventura, maybe we should hear from the superintendent to see how she feels about, this whole discussion that we're having on something that she's worked on.
About her, yeah.
I would also love to hear from Pat if you have any insights as a former principal.
I've been sitting back listening, and I think, hearing what you're saying, I understand that, but I think we've hired a superintendent, and I think we need to trust that she is going to work with her team and to come up with a resolution if there is an issue. And I think the whole idea of additional professional development was addressed last time. There is a process in place. If a school wants additional days, the school can submit a plan to the superintendent. So I think at this point, we should go along with what's presented to us and let it play out. And if there's this rare occurrence that might happen, then we need to come back and address it.
So do you feel that this should not be added?
I think it should stay the way it is. I really do.
I agree with her. I really think it's better if, I don't want to say that, or if she takes the decision herself, I don't want to, like, if she takes the decision herself, if she doesn't take the decision herself, it might decrease the way, like, it might minimize what we, like, her position or anything like that, but I think it's better if we all vote on it, as in, like, what if we don't feel comfortable with something she, like, I personally think that if she comes up with a plan and I don't feel comfortable, me as a student, like as a review as like how other students will see it, I think it's a better idea if we all like come in conclusions to give a little comment to see if we feel comfortable about it or not.
I'll share a couple thoughts. So I think, the way I think about this is that, one, this is a role that is the responsibility of the receiver to approve, school operational plans. So part of what we're voting on is delegating that authority to the superintendent, which I think is right. I also think, though, that it's important to have some process where, and again, leaving the language as is, I actually think to the point of, we don't want people in front of us like arguing their case. I actually think it puts a lot of pressure on all parties to try to resolve it in the phase where we hope they all go, which is they're reviewed and approved. So I think, keeping the language as is, it is ultimately our responsibility as the Lawrence Alliance for Education to approve those plans. This creates a way for us as a board to, again, review. It doesn't say hear arguments, it doesn't say hear from both parties and debate it, but review, because it's now an additional layer, and in some ways it provides some recourse, I think, for not just EMOs, but any school that, for whatever reason, through an extensive process with the superintendent and, the superintendent agrees that we should, it should come to us. It allows us as an LAE, who is ultimately responsible, to at least have the opportunity to review. And that's where I think it's important, because I just want to make sure that, and again, my goal is not to undermine the superintendent. My goal is that 100% of the plans are reviewed, worked out, and nothing comes to us. But in cases that, are exceptional, as an LAE member, I actually want the opportunity to review those plans, and again, defining what review means. I don't want a contentious process where, people are shouting, and I want this, but we have to define what review means. And so I like, as the board that's ultimately responsible for all of these boards, I feel very comfortable delegating this process to the superintendent, but again, reserving the right in those rare exceptions that we at least have the chance to review and hear, and then decide, how we move forward. So that's just my 2 cents.
I just want to be clear, I just think that that we're not going to have that many principals buck the superintendent's schedule, because they are direct line supervisory to the superintendent. EMOs don't have the same type of oversight, and so they're going to be more confrontational with the superintendent. That's my concern. And I'm not saying that confrontation isn't necessarily healthy. I think it is healthy in the times when it's appropriate. And I don't want to be here talking, arguing. And again, if this passes the way it is, I'm going to try to do my best to not hear any of them. You know what I'm saying? Because the way it is right now, it seems like anytime it could be. So, but if we can get an equivocation in there that says very few times or in extreme circumstances, I like that, may instead of shall, it gives some breathing room for the chair and the superintendent to come to an agreement on it before we have to all hear it.
So should it be here like a line, in the same way that we're having another line in the other document, something along the lines that, the rare circumstances defined by a process or something like that, because we don't have to write the whole process of what would that mean. Again, it could be that the superintendent has a meeting with us and said, these are our concerns, and I don't know, but that's something that we probably should mention, so then we don't have all those recurrences.
We did say we'd hear from the superintendent, so we should hopefully bring a voice in and then
Yeah.
continue. Thank you.
We are committed to a process where school leaders and their TLTs are able to design best proposals that they think will support their priorities and their goals. Later today, I will share with you some examples of that, but I can assure you that we've designed a process right now where schools have had the opportunity to do that. And so, we're committed for none of these schools to ever come before you, or for me to say to you, we have 1 or 2 schools who, after multiple attempts to sort of reconcile, we haven't been able to do that. In the rare instance that might happen, I do agree that we should talk about process and what that would look like, but we are committed for that not to happen given the process we've designed.
So you feel,
Your mic, I don't think it's on.
That on, sorry. Superintendent, you feel confident that the wording, the way it's written here, should be fine, and we should not include any other wording to...
Well, I'm pausing now because after the discussion, I see your point and I agree that a public discussion about some of these plans is very uncomfortable. And as I've reassured you, we're really designing a process where that does not happen, where there is multiple opportunity and chances for TLTs and school leaders to be very open in this process and explain their rationales, attach their staffing, their budget, their priorities, and we support them through that process, right? And as I said, later I will share with you some examples of how that's happened so far, but I can't guarantee that we won't have an instance down the line, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, where for whatever reason, we're not in agreement.
Right, and I think at the last meeting, this was widely discussed, particularly because there were already some EMOs that were not happy with the way the plan was presented. So this is the more reason why we should be very careful as to how this is stipulated or processed. I'd like to see that the wording under extreme circumstances added to that, because what we're saying is we have full confidence in the superintendent to do this and take care of this on our behalf, so that we don't need to deal with it on a daily basis or a weekly basis. So, but if everybody's it's comfortable with this, I'm fine with it as well. I just want to make sure that we don't go, that we realize that there might be out there something that could come up later on, because there were already words expressed as to being not totally 100% in agreement with the calendar that the superintendent presented previously.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the motion before us, that any school operational plan approved by the superintendent shall be deemed to be approved by the Lawrence Alliance for Education in its role as receiver for the Lawrence Public Schools. Any school operational plan not approved by the superintendent shall, under extreme circumstances, emphasis added, be submitted to the Lawrence Alliance for Education for review. And I do that as a form of a motion.
Second.
Can we just have a little more
We're discussing,
discussion?
yep.
So, one thing that I'm concerned about, because I do think that Ventura and Gabby made compelling points around this, is on this concept of review. So if we're going to vote on this motion tonight, and if it were to pass, what constitutes a review is still hanging out there, and I don't think that I think we need to either take that up tonight or take it up at our next board meeting and just get that squared away, because otherwise we might, then it's going to, if a situation does unfold, then it's going to come back to us.
May I?
To figure that out anyway.
Yeah, I believe that should not be an issue, Jessica, because when we're talking about review, we're talking about a review of what it is that the person coming before us wants versus what's on the calendar.
Right, but as Ventura said, that could take a lot of different forms. It could take like the dissenting school organization presenting their case and the superintendent presenting her side. It could be a completely paper review with no public presentation whatsoever, just us looking at written statements from each side or looking at the plan itself, but I'd want to know what it was.
So I would entertain a friendly amendment that said the motion that I moved, and that the idea or the process of review be defined within the next 2 months.
Okay.
You moving that as a friendly amendment?
I'll offer that as a friendly amendment.
I'll accept it as such.
All right.
But just to be clear, Mayor, on top of the earlier amendment of under extreme circumstances.
Right. That she wants a timeline on when are we going to define review. And we do it before we actually have to review one of these things. I think that's
Right.
legit.
Okay, other discussion? I'd like to, again, just my perspective. So I think I know I am completely in agreement with the, I think, sentiment of under extreme circumstances. I actually really would advocate that we not put it in, because now it creates another thing for us have to define, like, what are extreme circumstances versus not. No, honestly, I mean, it feels like, why are we adding that burden to ourselves? And so I think, I think the way that it is written, again, puts healthy pressure for folks to resolve this, which my goal is that we don't see any of these here. As an LAE member who is ultimately responsible by law for approving these plans, I would like to know that if there is such strong disagreement, I'd actually like to be able to know and say that I knew about those, and because I had a chance to review what the concerns were. And again, I think this notion of what review means is really important. I think the principles of, we do not want it to be contentious, we want it to build as opposed to be destructive, I think are principles that I would offer that we absolutely lead at the core of how we define review. But I just think adding further qualifiers requires more sort of definition. And then the shall, I think, protects us as an LAE in our ultimate responsibility of, ultimately, we approve these plans. Yes, we're delegating, but there's a layer that if there's an exceptional concern or something, we at least have had a chance to review, and that's listed here, and that we would then spend our time and energy defining what that review means along those principles of, it has to build, it has to, not be a destructive process for anyone involved.
I feel, Ventura, I think your point is well taken, but I feel that we're really taking this out of context, because this is only in reference to the calendar. And anybody coming before us that doesn't agree or that wants to change anything to do with the calendar because they don't agree that that time is appropriate for them to do what they need to do, and I know you have your, is going to change, is going to be detrimental to them in any way, shape, or form. So I am very clear as by adding this that we're only referring to what is listed on here and as the calendar is defined. Because it is my understanding at the last meeting that some of the EMOs or some of the other groups were not 100% in agreement, because some of them decided that they wanted to do their staff training outside of these states. And so, to me, this is very clear. I don't see why we're so concerned that this is going to give place for other reasons for people to come before us.
I think, it's funny because I wasn't sure where you were going with it, but I 100% agree. I think in trying to solve the issue of the calendar, we're opening this gateway of things, because I think what you guys laid out is that really the whole school improvement plan is on the table to be.
Well, and point of clarification, that's what the motion is not just about a calendar.
Yeah.
So a school improvement
It's a
plan
whole thing.
includes curricular, use of resource, I mean, it's many other reasons that.
So if a school building wanted to send the kids to less time at school, and the superintendent thought that was not fair, but it was like a new wavy thing, and everybody in California was doing it, and everybody felt cool about it, and kids were like, and the superintendents decided that's not important, they could come before us on that matter.
But that's the reason why we need to have a process. So because I'm thinking about the under extreme circumstances, that instead of here, I feel that that's where is defined in the process of, in order for you to come forward here, you have to meet these parameters first. Because otherwise, then you're right, everybody will be coming here.
Can I just ask a question?
Sorry, there was Pat's been waiting to get in,
Oh,
she had her
Pat,
hand up, so.
I just want to ask a question, general question.
You know, we're belaboring, I think, this issue. I think the schools have had the opportunity to present their information to the superintendent at the budget hearings. I think we need to let this process play out for this year to see how everything shakes down, the school goals, the school calendars. At those budget meetings, they discussed all aspects of their school, their goals, their calendar, their budget, their curriculum. So I don't see why we need this other layer on top of this. We really should let this play out for this year. Should there be an issue, then we can deal with it. But I think we're putting the cart before the horse when we're looking for, well, what if this school comes up and they don't like the calendar? Or what if they don't like the curriculum? I believe that we need to hear what went on in the budget meetings from the superintendent, whatever information she wants to share with us, and let this whole process play out. We need to delegate that power to her. After all, this is beginning to shift the transition over. We have to have that in the back of our head too, that at some point, this body is going to turn over the district to the superintendent and to the school board. So let's let the process play out. That's my recommendation.
Was there a question?
Yeah, it's just and forgive me if I might be naive in this, but if a teacher is unhappy with her principal, or a principal is unhappy with something that is going on, he or she normally goes to whom? Do they go to the superintendent, or do they go to the union?
They have union representative in each building.
So basically, this is what we're setting up, because the people that would be coming before us would probably be people that are not subject to go before a union representative. It would be someone that would have to deal directly with the superintendent or with us as the board if we are the ones making these decisions. And all we're doing is shifting our authority so that the superintendent deals with it. And in doing that, we have to trust her 100% with this. But we're trying to put something in place so that people still have a way of going to another body if they feel that they're not being heard or something is not working to the best of their interest after everything has been exhausted. I think that's why the wording of the extreme circumstances is being put in there just for that, so that people don't have to come before us with every little annoying headaches or little things that they didn't get come to us. Rather, go to the superintendent or to the means, whoever they need to go to, before they finally come to us.
Yeah, I think what I would say is that the process that's spelled out actually does require the work to happen between the school-based teams and the superintendent. So I don't think this motion is suggesting that any of that process would be bypassed. Just as a member of the LAE who ultimately is legally required to approve turnaround plans, if there is ever the rare exception or just unique circumstance where, there just is a plan, like, I'd like to at least be able to review that. And again, the review, in my mind, is not a hearing. This is just my personal, we can talk about it, but it's not a hearing, it's not a situation where we'd ever want to set up the superintendent to be in a position where someone's trying to publicly undermine, so in my mind though, I just want to know at the end of the day, when I get stopped on the street, let's say from members of that teacher leadership team and say, did you know? It's like, yeah, we did know. And there was a process for you for us to review that, and this is where we came out. So I just, I actually think it adds another layer of and again, I think this is gonna be rare, but it adds another layer of just confirmation for the superintendent in the decisions that she ultimately makes and we review and back up. So that's where I think again, I just think as written, it proves, or it puts due pressure on all parties. I think extreme circumstances, we design a process that, again, is not encouraging this to be leveraged, but at the end of the day, we've had the opportunity to review in those rare circumstances, as, you know, the language is there. I don't disagree with the language, it's just, I don't think we need it, and I think it just adds another thing we have to try to define. And I would actually agree with Pat here, where I think, you know, as is fine. I also think that later, when we hear from the superintendent, I think part of this is rooted in like concerns of like, are there issues this year? Are we getting ready to hear, you know, and I think some of the updates on the budget hearings with the schools may actually alleviate some of those concerns. But right now, it does feel like it's this kind of theoretical exercise. And so what I would suggest is that we approve the motion as is, and then sort of set a timeline for ourselves to define what this review actually means and looks like, and design it in principles that, again, we decide, but I think are about building community, sort of reaffirming, and something that is not, which I think is some of the fears I've heard, just something contentious and actually undermining to the superintendent.
So I have a motion on the floor, and I think at some point, we have to ensure that we're following parliamentary procedure so that we don't create new motions in the middle of old motions. And, I mean, I spend a lot of time with the school committee ensuring that they run the meetings in a process that doesn't have a layer of chaos around discussion. And I think the motion that I put on the floor does a couple things with the amendment and with the stipulation of the time frame, because I think that the chair has a level of concern about open architecture, and I'm gonna lean on the subject matter experts. It might be founded, it may not be. So that's why we're doing this motion, to make sure that in the instances where open architecture is not working and the superintendent, there's a check on it, or we wouldn't be giving her this full power. We would want to see every single one of the plans. So I think that covers the idea that in those instances where there's conflict or there's differences, that we'll hear some. All I'm saying is that the concern was that is too open, that we want to narrow it. The language of extreme circumstances narrows the instances in which we'll see it. Doesn't do away with the instances in which we'll see it. You may get a chair of the ED board that everything seems like it's an extreme circumstance, and allow them all to come before us. But I think that's an important thing to do. And the review process having to have a dateline. The motion on the floor, I think, covers everybody's concerns, and I think that I think you may be misunderstanding Member Mariano's position on this matter. I think if given the opportunity, and I'll have her speak on it, if she wants, I think she'd vote against it the way it was currently. But you may want to check in with her.
What do you think?
What? No, she said that she would leave it as is. Not to speak for you, Pat, sorry.
The current motion.
I'm sorry, Dan?
I was just wondering, the current motion, I misunderstood your position on it. It seems like the current motion as is, that you had an issue with it.
I do.
Oh, I thought you said that you would leave, which motion do you have is it this motion you have a problem with, or the motion Dan made?
No, I just think we should let this process play out the way it
One
is,
without the
So
any
without the
motion.
motion?
without the motion.
Well, without the motion at all.
Right.
Without any amendments, I think.
So without motion, that means that,
The power lies with the superintendent.
No.
The motion, the power,
power
it's
lies
the
with us.
board, because we're the receivers.
Right. Without the motion, we have to review everything.
so without the motion, we will have to review all the,
No,
That's the first time hearing that. I mean, it's laid out here, and it's in this.
Here it
map,
says-
But I think it's the first time I'm seeing it.
Again, just to be clear, the turnaround plan states that the receiver is ultimately responsible for approving
yes.
the turnaround plans. And I think what this is trying to lay out is that the board would delegate as the
Wait, can
receiver.
you have been confusing me all night. The turnaround plan and the school operational plans are not the same thing.
Correct. So I apologize for my ongoing contribution to your confusion. Can
I use that? I like that.
So
referring to the
this
school
is correct.
operational plan.
I just misspoke there. The LAE board as a receiver is responsible per the turnaround plan. This is what dictates.
Per
We're
the
responsible
turnaround
for approving all school improvement plans.
I see.
What we're doing here is delegating that authority to the superintendent.
And Pat, you're saying that you do think we should do that, or you don't think?
I believe we should go ahead with the delegation of that to the superintendent.
Okay,
So that's-
so
that's in
you
the-
do, you believe in this as it is written?
Right.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Even with the review of the, when operation plans are
I
not
think,
approved?
the plans become public record anyway, so they're out there for us to review.
My motion's still on the floor.
Okay, so,
Yeah, and just to let you guys know, I feel like I'm moving more in Ventura's and Pat's direction on this one.
I am in between Ventura and the mayor. So what I was going to say is that
Let's vote with me.
I
Yeah,
do, I agree about the process, that we need to have a process. I agree about us narrowing down to what exactly we need to review
Yeah.
and the process to review it. It's just that I don't feel that we needed to put it in this motion here. Because by putting in this motion under extreme circumstances, then we will have to define here what extreme circumstances are. But if you have a process, we can say as defined by a process, and then in the process, we define in the process what we consider a merit for us to review and how we're going to review it. So then we're narrowing down to the extreme cases as we all agree. Because I don't think we're going to be agreeing tonight what is extreme case.
I mean, we could also, instead of in extreme circumstances, we could say, provided reasonable attempts at, at reaching a mutual conclusion are exhausted or something. Then we're gonna have to define
I
reasonable.
think this assumes,
in this
though,
ex-
I think
Yeah.
that the
Okay.
process assumes that, it's on the superintendent and the schools to figure it out. We design a review, again, that is rare, but we
Right.
have to design that review.
So could it be at the end of the, when it says Alliance for Education for Review, as agreed by a process, and then we define what the process is?
Yeah, and
Because in
maybe
the
can we
process-
still add the thing about it, like us defining the review process?
And defining
in a
who-
timely manner?
Yes,
But-
and defining who is going to be,
Yes.
because then anybody can say, well, I want to be, in front of the board.
Well, right, it would have to be this group, but I just want to underscore a point that Pat made, which I think is important, which is that everything about this, like, what we're trying to do on this board, right, part of what we're trying to do is transition back to local control and leadership, and part of the process for that is restoring some of this authority to the superintendent's position. So we do need to be on a path that's doing that. And I feel like I have now flipped positions twice on this. But I just think that that is also an important point. And in doing this, we are it's a good thing. So I think actually looking at it maybe from Pat's perspective, we are moving in that direction, but we're still reserving
They're right.
a review right as the receivership board, just to make sure that we're doing our due diligence and right by the community. So maybe what I would say is, yes, let's do it as a step towards returning, some of this authority to the superintendent, but also allowing for, us carrying out our responsibility as the receivership board, provided that we figure out that review process.
My fellow board members, based on the lengthy discussion that we've had on this one particular motion, and seeing that perhaps some of us might be a little bit confused as to what exactly this refers to, and I'm coming up with this based on the discussions that I'm hearing here tonight. Perhaps I'd like to make a motion to table that particular item, the vote on that particular item, only because that will give us enough time to really concentrate as to what it is that we're voting on. Because this should not be something, based on the way I understand it, and forgive me, maybe my understanding is it's at a lower level than some of yours. I feel that this is pretty self-explanatory as to what it refers to, and we are the ones that are making it more complicated. So perhaps we could entertain a motion to table it and then review it on our own and then come up with the right wording which is what concerns us now.
And
I
just-
think we're all in agreement that we do want to delegate that power to the superintendent, and we just want to give anyone who has an issue of concern, of serious concern, an opportunity to have an outlet to go to if they can't find a solution to whatever it is that has to do with the school improvement plan. That is my understanding of what this is
Yes.
all about, so.
Yes.
And just a point of parliamentary procedure, a motion to table cannot be debated. It has to be voted on as soon as it's seconded. And so I second it.
Okay, so there's a motion to table the discussion of this, and
You can look it up.
yeah, I worry about the timeline for the superintendent to be able to actually meet the April 15th
That's true.
timeline, but let's vote on the motion. So all those in favor of tabling?
Aye?
Actually, can we do maybe a hand raise just to capture it?
Do a roll call.
Okay, so can we do a roll call vote, please?
No.
Yes.
Yes.
No.
Mariano,
No,
Astoria,
No.
Okay, motion fails,
Gabby doesn't get to vote?
yes.
Oh, okay.
non-voting.
But my motion is still on the floor,
So
by the
there is a
way.
motion on the floor to amend, to approve this with the amendment of under extreme circumstances.
And the added timeline.
And just, can you say what the last part would be?
That,
I know that the review, but we would-
that the review process be defined within 2 months.
Yes, thank you.
Within 2 months.
2 months of the vote, yeah, tonight, 2 months of the vote.
Ventura, could you read that motion, please?
Can I ask a question? Is it kosher to have kind of a straw poll about that without like, for people to say how they would be likely to vote? Because I feel like there might, if that motion's gonna fail, then we are gonna need to figure this out tonight. And if that motion's gonna pass, then it's just gonna pass.
I know it seems like I'm playing the parliamentarian and it's benefiting me, but this is honestly the truth. You can continue discussion and people can tell where they would land on such a vote, or you can just call the vote and let people vote their way, and then if it fails, a motion that fails can be then resubmitted with a different language or different time. I mean, like, you know what I'm saying? So, and there'll be no, I mean, we just had a motion fail, and that's fine. That can happen in a meeting. But I think that we've talked a lot, so I don't know, I think the motion that I presented was trying to get to the point that I have concern about, that the chair has concern about, that you have concern about with the timeline. I think it does that, considering that some of the people who didn't want to change it at all have both said these should be extreme circumstances. I'm not sure why saying extreme circumstances in the motion is a problem. If it's gonna be so rare, I don't know why we can't just say in the rare instance that there's that. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you, and language in these matters are very important, because when, it will only matter when the problem is, it'll only matter when the problem is so acute that everyone's gonna go to this piece of paper. And I want, when they go to this piece of paper, to say, oh, it has to be an extreme circumstance. And the word shall, because I do a little homework, the legal definition of shall is must. It's the only word that imposes a legal obligation on your readers to tell them something is mandatory. So if they disagree on something and we don't hear it, now we're going against one of our rules. Every time they disagree about something that is that has to do with the plan, in approving the plan, it shall be heard before us. In any school operational plan not approved by the superintendent, hey, you gotta go back and work on this. And they're like, no, we don't wanna work on it. That's a disapproval. Now we must hear it. I think we have to soften that language, or we will be a board that will hear these grievances. And I think that's a bad thing to set up. First of all, I don't want to hear them. Second of all, I don't think that that's the way you can run a school system. So I think my motion on the floor, if we vote on it and everyone supports it, I think it's harmonious. It gives everyone something that they want, and it still accomplishes the time frame to get the superintendent her calendar out the door. So if we vote on it and it fails, then somebody else can have an idea. I don't have all the best ideas.
All right, let's just vote then.
Any other discussion? Pat, Gabby?
Can you just
Naomi?
read the motion?
So, that any school operational plan approved by the superintendent shall be deemed to be approved by the Lawrence Alliance for Education in its role as receiver for the Lawrence Public Schools. Any school operational plan not approved by the superintendent shall, under extreme circumstances, be submitted to the Lawrence Alliance for Education for review. And I don't know the exact language, but the review process should be defined within the next 2 months.
Right, for review, yes, and the LAE shall define, will define the review process within the next 2 months.
Okay.
Questions about that? Just make sure we're clear. Everyone's had their chance to say their piece? I mean, I just want to, like, you know, like, I mean, yep. Yep.
All right. I'll go for it, yes. Oh, yes, yes.
Silverio,
Yes.
Rivera,
Yes.
Rodriguez,
No.
Mariano,
No.
Custodia Lora,
Yes.
So the motion passes 4-2. So we will write this up, though, and I want to make sure we have the language correct. So I'll touch base with folks to make sure that we got the right language. All right, the next item is budget meeting updates.
Yeah, I wanted to give you a flavor of what the leadership team worked with school-based teams, and so these were budget meetings. We named these budget meetings, and I wanted to give you a little bit of the process. I want to share with you what a school improvement plan highlights. I want to share with you what a school operational plan entitles, and then I'll give you again some examples of staffing and budget implications. I also wanted to mention that Pat Mariano was with us for several days, and so I welcome her feedback and her insight into the process. So a school operational plan has several layers to it. I'm just going to read the big headlines and give you a little bit of an example of what that looks like. First, we asked schools to tell us about their discretionary funds, which is very, very little. An example of that is extra duty stipends, for example. We asked schools to tell us about their school curriculum choice. We, of course, want them to be aligned to the standards. We asked schools to talk about their professional development activities before, during schools, and after regular student school days. We asked schools to talk about their school-based calendars. We asked schools to talk about their schedules for staff and students. We ask our schools to give us scheduling school-wide parent and teacher meetings. We ask schools about their notices and their announcements and how they proceed with those. We ask schools about their school health and safety challenges. We ask them about their dress code. And we ask them about additional duties, class size, and finally, even bulletin boards. So we get a very comprehensive understanding of the operationals of a school. Each of these plans is endorsed by teacher leadership teams. And here is a sampling of what that endorsement sounds like. We, the teacher leadership team, strongly support the 2019-20 operational plan outlined above and believe it is in the best interest of our students and teachers. This plan allows us to have both sufficient time for student instruction and sufficient time to plan, collaborate, and grow as teachers in order to ensure our time with students in the most effective possible. Additionally, we believe this plan represents a significant support in the significant decrease in teacher workload and will lead to a more sustainable school model. So that's just an example of what the teacher leadership teams signed. So each school is asked to bring signatures, originals, and then they send us copy. And each school writes a statement in support of that. So we reviewed every single plan. Did you want to look at, yep, you can take an example of that, yep. And then we also reviewed the school's improvement plan that is very specific to instructional goals and priorities. We spent a lot of time dissecting them, giving them feedback, supporting their goals, and asking for alignment to district-wide goals. Lastly, we talked about the actual budget. So the entire process, we call it budget, but we're rethinking about what is it really that we care about? We cared a lot about the instructional goals and the operational plans. And because the budget is actually such a small amount of money and it all staffing and salaries, as we've been discussing, it's very little movement that happens. But I'll give you an idea. We had a school that had 2 FTEs in the form of interventionist, and they wanted to convert those into ESL teachers, for example. We had another school who was requesting specialists because they had added additional time on learning for their students. So there are many, many examples that I can give you, but most of them were on request for FTEs, either additional or trading or substituting FTEs. And the schools believed that they needed additional ESL staffing, special education, and mental health services, all in alignment with our goals. The other thing that schools lastly talked about, let's see, SOPs, instructionals. I think those were the big ones. So Pat, do you want to give us a little bit of your experience also?
Yes, I would love to, and I want to thank you for the invitation. I attended 13 school meetings, and I found that the leadership team was very, very supportive of each individual's school. And as the superintendent said, each school leader came in to discuss their goals, the budget, their staffing, and their programs for the coming year. I found the team very supportive of each principal, assisting in clarifying goals, offering new programs for identified students, and at the end, they were asked for a wish list, which I thought was really, to the heart of what we're trying to do with the schools. If you had the opportunity, what would your wish be for your school? And the team took that under advisement. I found the established protocol for the meetings kept everyone on task and ensured that the needs of each school were addressed. The meetings ran perfectly, and I was very impressed with the team, with the individual school leaders that came in and were able to present everything in a very clear way. So, which tells me that the guidelines that were established for the schools were very clear and very easy to follow. The fact that the teacher leadership team supported the plan, to me, was very, very important also. So I think the process overall was outstanding.
Thank you, Pat. I just wanted to add that there are also proposals back to this school operational plan on the issue of professional development. We did have a few schools that did submit proposals that are outside of the guidelines. Their rationales were strong, they were very thoughtful, and so they're under consideration.
Any questions?
I'm curious, was there any consistency or themes in terms of where are schools struggling the most to find the resources that they want for, like, what are the trade-offs that people are making, and where are the things that they'd really love to allocate more resources to but don't feel that they can?
I mean, I think schools always want more additional support for getting smaller class size, supporting students who are dysregulated or who have behavioral challenges. So there were many requests for additional paraprofessionals. There were some requests for mental health care. There were requests for special education. And so we think broadly the allocation, especially the district allocations for special education and for English learners. But I think the majority of it was like, if we had an additional paraprofessional, then this particular cohort of students would be better supported.
And if I may add, none of the wish lists were way out there, like something that, out of the ordinary. They were very specific, and the teachers, the principals came in with data to support their asking what they needed for their building. So I was very impressed with that also.
Based on the information that was presented, do you feel that there were many revisions that needed to be made to some of the proposals that were presented, or were those revisions to reduce the amount of income for any particular schools, or to increase, or how were those made?
Great question. I think the revisions that we saw that were impacted or guided by the guidelines were on this matter of minimum student hours. We had some schools that were outside of the guidelines, so we really pushed them to come closer to meeting some equitable student hours, time on learning, and schools successfully did that. The other one was on this challenge of professional development, where there were some schools who were way outside also of the guideline, and schools that felt strongly that they needed the additional time made very thoughtful proposals and rationales for adding some additional time.
Great, thank you. So now we are to adoption of last minute's minutes. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Great. Any miscellaneous comments, announcements?
I know that as a member of the school board, and as the chair of the school board, that we took a vote asking specifically that the LAE board consider the idea of the number of school committee meetings, not LAE meetings, school committee meetings. And it's my duty as chair to come and bring that information. The other motion that was made and passed was not only for the school board to meet more often than has been assigned by the commissioner, but also that there be joint subcommittee meetings with the school board. And I do understand that there's been some information passed down by the commissioner on this, but I did not want to not do my job, which was my committee sent me to tell you all they want to meet more, and they want to meet during the subcommittees. I have some of the communications that the commissioner has provided, and I'm going to bring that back to them. And I'm also going to encourage them to come to these meetings and to these subcommittee meetings that are coming on, to be a vocal part. As a member of the Budget and Finance Committee, I'm going to try to get them to be recognized as we have these discussions through those conversations. I know we have what was it, 4 subcommittee meetings coming up on the budget, 4 of them. I'm going to encourage them to be at that, and as a member, I'm going to try to get them recognized if they have questions as it pertains to the budget as we review it. But I just wanted the full board to know that we'd made that motion on the school board, but that there was a communication on the commissioner and his authority to set out the number of school board meetings. And it was not what the school board wanted.
I'm sorry, I have a question about that. On the question of the number of meetings, that's not something that we have any control over, right?
We do not.
So what is the request to us?
The request was for us to meet, basically to take up meeting more, for them to meet more. And the commissioner was, the chair.
That they want us to advocate with the commissioner on their behalf?
They wanted us to vote to do it, to just meet more. And then the commissioner, the chair through the commissioner had a conversation about it, and the commissioner came out with a memo about the number of times they shall meet. It's that little sticky word, shall. And they can meet, I think it was quarterly we're gonna meet. Yeah, quarterly.
Okay, but so, again, if we vote to meet more, how does that solve their problem?
No, they wanted us to vote to allow them to meet more.
But we don't have the
not
power
ours.
to enforce that.
I know, that's why I said that the information from the commissioner, I just wanted everybody to be informed about the matter, because I was told to come and tell you guys.
Okay,
I am a herald today. I'm just-
okay, got you.
Point of
So-
information, not an actual request for action from our board, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I gave, and the
Okay.
reason why we're not taking action is because the commissioner stepped in and used his power, said the school board will only meet quarterly.
Okay. So, putting that aside, because I just don't think we should vote on things that we have no power over, I do think that I think this issue of having communication with the school committee and having joint subcommittee meetings is something that has been under discussion, and it's been kind of, has been kind of backburnered over the last couple of months, because we've had the budget stuff and a bunch of other things come up, but I do think it's a really important one, and I would definitely be in favor of that, and I don't know if that means that we're going to ask them to conform to our schedule, or that we would try and find some jointly workable schedule, but I had thought that that conversation was going to proceed more than it has.
And just, again, just a point of information, those motions have not come up on the school board floor for discussion or for voting, and what did come up was these two things about allowing the school board to meet more and to establish joint subcommittees. Both have been decided with the commissioner.
Well, both, the commissioners weighed in about both of those? Yeah. Oh, he said no to both of them?
Yeah, and he, what he did was he gave an opinion on the issue of meetings.
But
I don't want to say he just said no. I mean, he
Can I ask that we should probably put this on our next agenda, just to be able to, like,
all right.
you know, if we want to share information. Because it feels like there's
Okay.
emails and things that, you know, it just seems like it's something that we, you know.
I was just giving you the information. I was going to
Okay.
take back to the board that I think that a good interim space while we're trying to figure this out is that school board members should be at the LAE board
Yes.
member meetings. The idea that they can't be here and be part of what we do is setting up the negative dichotomy that already exists and perpetuating it.
What, but,
So I
yeah,
want
I
them to be
totally
at these
agree,
things.
yeah.
And I think that, the chair's not here, but I'm sure the chair, in rare circumstances, that there was something burning in the stomach of a school board member who's not a member of the board, there's two of us on the board, by the way, that they wouldn't be recognized or they wouldn't be heard. You know what I'm saying? Like, so I think that them being here is a strong sentiment of it, and maybe even may allay the need to meet more. I know that's serving for me because I have to be at both meetings, but I just wanted everybody to know that we did those votes and the commissioner weighed in. That's the only reason I'm bringing it up.
So
Yeah.
appreciate that.
So, but I just want to clarify, when the commissioner weighed in on the issue of how often the school board meets, he does have the authority to mandate that. On the issue of whether the LAE and the school board have joint subcommittee meetings, he does or does not have the authority to mandate that,
I think in the end, he does have the authority to mandate that. That is why it's been clear with the decision on the meetings. But again, I think that the reason why I bring it up is that I think that having them come to these meetings will inform us, our conversation at the other meetings, and it's helpful. But again, they're gonna have to vote to do that, or
yeah,
or
I
not.
think it would be great if they did.
Was there a-
But can we put this on the next, I do,
Sure.
I feel like we should talk about this, and I think we should, let's put it on the agenda for the next board meeting.
Just looking at the hearings, and I know, I'm sorry, I should have brought this up when this was presented. These are listed as hearings. Are these public hearings for the budget, or are these just for us to review the budget?
These are public hearings.
Because it says hearings,
Yeah, these are public hearings. What happened in the
but
schools?
we have not received a copy of the budget. So how can we have hearings if we haven't had a chance to review the budget?
My assumption
Excellent
that was that we were gonna get it
Right.
before March 21st.
Correct.
I'm
How
sorry?
much
Yeah,
before
so-
March 21st?
Yeah, I'm
First
not
one is the
sure, but the
21st.
idea is that these are budget hearings where the subcommittee has copies of the budget and are hearing, you know, these are the three budget hearings we'd be setting up. But I don't know if the superintendent or the team has a sense of the
My
timeline.
apology for bringing this up now, but I think it's important.
I think the intention is to collaborate with the subcommittee and get a sense of where we are, so that when it becomes a public hearing and a discussion, we all have a sense of process, where we're at, and proposed recommendations. But I hear your point about if it becomes a public hearing. I'm
If
not
that-
clear about that.
But but Julia, the question, if this is scheduled as a public hearing for March 21st, no one on the LA or in the public has seen the actual budget yet. When are we going to see the actual budget?
And this would have to be publicized
Yes.
prior to the meetings.
Yeah,
If
perhaps-
a-
Correct.
if a
It's an
hearing,
open public meeting.
We don't have enough time.
I just don't know if, I don't know if the staff is ready today to tell us when we're gonna get the document, but we definitely need the document before the 21st.
Well, I would, friendly amendment to that, like, we don't need it the day before the 21st. We need it like 5 days before the 21st.
Yeah, I think we would call these budget committee meetings, because we're not ready to be sharing documentations. So today was our green light to do okays for the school operational plans, which has implications on our actual budget. So we're not ready to do that next week.
Okay, so then either this needs to be renamed as it's a budget subcommittee meeting, right? And actually, subcommittee meetings of this body are open to the public, but it's
Yes.
not, but it's not a public hearing.
Correct.
Okay, so when are we now scheduling actual public hearings about the budget too, or are these just budget subcommittee meetings, all of these?
So, Mr. Chair, just a sense of what we're talking about, I think I'm gonna refer to the chair's
email
email
sent,
about
yeah.
this. Yeah, please bear in mind, this is the chair speaking, please bear in mind that we are all learning, creating this process as we go this year. And in May, he intends to debrief all parties and then present a full calendar for next year's budget. I think in saying that, he's saying that, I'm not sure that as some of the dates came in last minute, some of the definitions around what we're gonna do around this is kind of we're driving the car and building it too, so I think that that's what he's trying to say. And then if you have I would think that this conversation, maybe a question for the chair, might be something you bring up with him, not in a public setting.
I would just say that the leadership team is ready to have discussions with the budget subcommittee for 2 or 3 meetings. We would propose that we have a public hearing, perhaps a straw vote on the April 10th, and that we have a discussion and vote following that. If additional time needs to be added in terms of a public hearing, then we're also open to that.
Okay, so I would just say that we need to, I'm sorry to be nitpicky about language, but I think it will be confusing to people otherwise. These first 3 items are budget subcommittee
Budget
meetings.
Yep.
Open to the public, noticed, but not a hearing for public input. At the LAE regular meeting on April 10th, we are going to include a public hearing about the budget with public input and sufficient time for that. Right? That's what we're saying? Yes?
Yes.
Okay. Can we just amend this document to reflect that?
Well, I took the document out of
We'll
order.
just make sure that it's listed as public
It's not-
meetings.
It's not really a motion.
Yeah, no, I mean, and we didn't vote on this. It's just, I
Oh,
think the
all right.
meetings, yeah, I mean, I think we can clarify language to express what the meetings are.
Okay.
So-
And to add that the public hearing's going to be on the 10th, as the superintendent has suggested.
Yep. Great. Okay, with that, I will adjourn the meeting at,
Ventura, before you do that, I just want to congratulate the superintendent and the dance group of the Lawrence High School for a tremendous presentation that they had with the student teachers dancing with the stars. It was really well put together, and it was very professional. So congratulations. And I was able to see, we were able to see the superintendent dressed in her best, right? What were you dancing? What was it?
Paso doble.
Paso doble.
really,
Wow.
So I just wanted to express that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cool.
Okay, so
And
after the
I
mayor
told you the whole
says
time we were
his-
discussing, just wanted to not go unnoticed that there was members of the union leadership with us, and we totally forgot to say they were here. But they were here the whole time.
Larry Burnham and Kim were here. Oh, they were.
Yeah, they were.
My apologies.
Yes, executive board
I mean,
members.
it got so heated.
Yeah.
I mean, on Shal, I mean, it was like,
And I guess just my final thought is just, again, I appreciate the level of debate. This is a real public body, you know, we debate issues, we disagree, and so I just appreciate the liveliness of it, and at the end of the day, it's all about what's best for the kids in Lawrence, so just to really appreciate that. So with that, we are adjourned at 8:12. Thank you.